Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Precursive podcast. I hope you're all well. For those rejoining, welcome back. And for those of you joining for the first time, where have you been? That is an old, terrible joke, but I'm still going to keep using it. I'm Jonathan Corrie, the co-founder and the CEO of Precursive. And as many of you will already know, I have the privilege of chatting to some of the best minds in the world of customer success and professional services in B2B SaaS and enterprise software. A number of the themes that we've been unpacking in season 2, we've continued some of the CS and the remote reality pieces, but we've also been looking a lot more deeply really at what companies are doing in terms of their own organizations and putting both their people and their customers, and in particular customer experience, at the center of everything that they do. So today I am delighted to be joined by Kimberly Sims, who is the CCO at Planful. Hi, Kimberly. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on all the way from Littleton. Is it Littleton or Littletown, Colorado?
Littleton.
Me being English, I'd probably Littleton.
Yeah, Littleton,
okay,
Colorado.
excellent. Wonderful. And how is the weather today in that side of the world then?
You know, I think the seasons are a little bit confused out here. It's a little toasty.
Right.
It was about 99 degrees over the last few days on average. So it's warm. It's very warm here in Colorado, but we'll quickly turn to snow by the end of the month. I'm most certain of it. So we'll see.
Right. Well, unfortunately, extreme weather is the way right now in both the US and Europe, unfortunately. So hopefully we as a planet can get on top of that. But before we go into global warming, we'll probably talk a little bit more about customer success. But thank you for coming on. So if you don't mind, can you give a little bit about yourself and your background? I'm happy for you to start with the current role and work back, or some people start at the beginning and work forward, but over to you.
Yeah, no, thanks. That's great. So I'll start from the beginning and move forward. That's probably easier for my brain to work that way today. So yeah, I've been in customer facing roles my entire career, a little bit over 20 years. I think I'm at 22 years now. Started in consulting. I worked for a company called Anderson Consulting. So I've officially dated myself. It's now known as Accenture. Started in the world of consulting, doing process transformation work, but believe it or not, I was also a developer. So developed a couple of programs in C++ and Java, which I was terrible at. So quickly moved out of those types of roles and back into traditional professional services. I worked at a startup that got acquired by IBM and spent about 11 years at IBM, which was great. Tried a number of different roles, all in the professional services realm, from individual contributor roles to leadership roles to offerings to marketing to partner enablement. You name it. I was able to have 3 kids while I was at IBM. It was great. And then after things kind of stabilized personally and professionally, I decided to get my hair on fire again and went back to the startup world and joined a little company called Anaplan. Anaplan was a rocket ship when I joined. I think my hair is still cooling down, honestly. But that was my first official role in what we call customer success. And when I was at Anaplan, it was still very new. Figuring out what the heck is customer success. Is it a combination of PS? Is it CS? Is it sales? Is it training? All of the above. So that was a fun ride. Went to another startup called HireView, where I led our customer success organization. And most recently, I'm actually, as you mentioned, the chief customer officer for a company called Planful. Planful is a tool that is used for the Office of Finance, and where we actually help finance professionals with the budgeting, planning, consolidations, close processes, all that good stuff. And my role at Planful, I'm responsible for professional services, customer success, training, and technical support. So it's the first time I've had the opportunity to have all of the different groups under my umbrella, which I absolutely love. I really can influence the customer journey and make sure all the transitions and everything works really well together. So that's a little bit about my history.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's nothing wrong with experience, Kimberly, rather than aging. I remember, I think it was Arthur Anderson. So I may look young, but I'm in fact, it's oil of you lay twice a day that keeps me looking young. But it's fascinating
too. That's very
well, that's definitely on. I've got a light shining in my face as well. So, but I think it's a fascinating career journey because it's very close to my heart in terms of like the people that I talk to and who we work with in the marketplace. And I'm super interested through the course of this conversation. You talk about how great it is having everything under your umbrella. That's one of the hottest topics really for a lot of businesses from a strategy and an organizational structure perspective. We had a guy called Matt Berg on, who was at SAP Concur, and they just merged their professional services and customer success teams globally. So we're going through that journey. Now you've been there about a year, which means you would have joined the business, I think, in the pandemic. And so what were some of the things you had to navigate as an executive through that experience?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been asked that before. And at the time, I think we were already in the mode of working remotely. So you just have to, dive right in. But I think the thing that was there were two things that were probably the most difficult for me. One is just being able to connect in person with your teams. The big part when you start as an executive, obviously, is get to know your people, get to know your teams, understand what's working and what's not. And it's great to be in the field with them. It's great to meet them in person. Your big job is understanding those people and earning their trust, and then bringing them together to really develop that go forward strategy and vision that you want to take them down. So doing that remotely was a little bit more challenging. I joined, right before the holidays. So doing virtual holiday parties and Secret Santas and all of that, a little bit harder to do, but we figured it out, I think, just fine. But probably connecting with the team live, I felt that miss, and just wanting to get in a room and whiteboard and talk about where do we want to take our team. A little harder to do over Zoom, but again, I think we figured it out okay. I think the second was connecting with customers. I mean, there's nothing more valuable than being able to sit across the table from a customer to just understand what's working and what's not. And, again, you can do it over Zoom, fine, but in person, you can really take that next level down and get to know the customer too. And also earn their trust to help them, feel that you're actually going to help them and listen to what their needs are. So those were definitely challenges that I didn't have to experience in other roles. I could be face to face. But I think, we managed through it. We figured it out.
Yeah, because also, in that period of time, customer success has been there's been so much focus on it and pressure on it. And I was talking to another guest on this show, recording a show with a lady, Ozkan, who's at a company called Instabase, and she raised something which was really interesting on just the amount of pressure on those people because they were being pulled on from all sides, right? And it's kind of difficult to see that because you don't when you end the meeting and you might see someone a bit like, you can't. It's like you shut up a call and it's gone. So I can imagine how many people is in the overall in your team then now.
Yeah, we have
you have to manage virtually.
Yeah, 70 actually. And it's a global team. And you raised such a good point. You think about what the people were going through during that time too. And I don't know them personally yet. They don't know me enough as well to open up and kind of share what's going on. And everybody was impacted differently, whether they had little kids at home trying to study, or whether they were dealing with a sick relative, or whether they were by themselves and feeling isolated. And, you don't know them well enough for them to open up just yet. So it takes a little while to build that trust. And again, I think we did okay with it, but it was tricky. But with 70 folks, around the globe, I have a bunch of folks in India and then all over the United States. It definitely posed some unique challenges. But yeah.
I can imagine. And so because in your career, like I'm not, I try and do my preparation. So you've seen that sort of client success services piece in one of your roles, and HireVue being a much more classic customer success role. Anaplan is a very actually PS-centric customer success organization, or at least was in your time. It's changing.
That's right.
It's changing quite a lot at the moment under Erin Simmons, the CCO there.
Yeah.
How have you seen it? How do you, given that experience, what do you see as like the next things that are going to change over the coming years? What direction do you see it heading?
Yeah, it's funny. I talk to a lot of CEOs that are working on developing their customer strategies, and they want to know, oh, should we take renewals or should we not? Should we have the CSM's own, upsell or not? And the PS and CS separation. It's fascinating because I've been fortunate to see a lot of different variations of the model. And first it was, oh, they should own everything, renewals and upsell, and oh wait, don't, because then they show up with dollar signs in their eyes when they talk to the customer, and the customer sees right through that. And I think the answer is it kind of depends. And I think we're going to continue to evolve. I think you've got to look at the type of company. You have to look at the complexity of the product. You have to look at the stage the company's in. You have to look at the type of customer and the sophistication of the customer and what do they require from a CS organization. I think the bottom line is I think it's going to keep evolving. The good news is I think we know kind of the core building blocks of what makes sense in a customer success organization. Then you have to go through the process of really figuring out, okay, the stage of the company we're at, the type of resource we need to service the type of customer we have looks like this. But I think, as the company matures, that role continues to evolve. Having a customer success manager responsible for everything under the sun for a complex product for a sophisticated customer, they're not going to do very well at that. And when you want to grow a customer, that's also a sales skill set that not every customer success resource has. So it's very interesting. I think you have to really just be flexible and be agile to be able to adapt the role as the company continues to mature as well. So what it looks like tomorrow, I think it depends on where you are and what company you're at. And I think you'll have to figure out the right building blocks that make sense for that company. That's my opinion, at least.
No, I think it depends is a great answer. I think there's too much black and white in particularly given the amount of stuff on social about who owns what and this, that, and the other, and it totally depends on a number of factors. You mentioned the building blocks. I'm curious to know in your organization now, can you tell us a little bit about some of those? You actually wrote a lot about customer experience recently. I reshared one of your posts on customer experience. What are some of the key building blocks that you've focused on in customer success at Planful? Just as a follow-up to that point that you were making, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, for sure. So when I got to Planful, I'll be honest with you, customer success didn't really exist. There were 2 or 3 CSM type roles, but they were there in a very reactionary model to support some of the bigger clients. The majority of customer success was actually being held within the sales organization. So they had an account manager type of a role that was responsible for servicing the customer, growing the customer, and renewing the customer. And they each had massive portfolios. And so you can imagine the success rate of doing all of those functions with a huge portfolio. Not a lot of focus, and not able to do anything as well as potentially we could have. So what's been great just in the year that I've been at Planful, we've broken out the role. We actually now have that sales team is focused on expanding the customers. That's their skill set. They're in sales. They're really good at that, developing the relationships and expanding the use of the product. And then we've actually created a customer success organization at Planful with CSMs now, which is fantastic. And we've created the segmentation of accounts and how to properly service accounts based on their needs, based on propensity to churn, all of those good nuggets. So we've done that. And then we've also created a renewals team. We've got a very small renewals team that's very much focused on the transaction itself. The stage of the company actually warranted that renewals function, and it's a small group. And what's great is to see it all coming together now. Those building blocks, they're in different chunks across the team, but they're all performing well. We're exceeding our upsell targets. We've increased our retention, and all the renewals are now coming in on time. They have a good lift associated to them. They're getting the multi-year terms, all the things that you want to hear from a renewal, but it's because we put focus on the functions. And we didn't have to grow a massive organization to do all of this. We had to do it at scale. We just had to be smart and make sure we had our folks focused on the right areas of the business. So it's been really fun over the year. We've done a lot. We've made a huge leaps, and all of the metrics of the business are improving, which has been fun to see.
Wonderful. Well, we'll come back to some of those metrics a little bit later on, but I'm very much of the opinion that specialization scales. I mean, we're a different size organization for you guys, but we're growing rapidly. I think we'll probably be circa 60, 70 people by the end of this year, for example. And I think one of the things that I always comment on internally here at Precursive is like, if there isn't a dedicated person to that thing that we're trying to do, it's going to slip through the cracks and we're not going to do it as well as we hope. So let's not blame anyone when that happens, because it's just going to happen. And kind of when everyone realized that, they're like, oh, well, yeah, actually, no, you're right. That kind of makes sense. Yeah, definitely. And accept that there's some things that you just simply won't be able to do. You're in an area which is very interesting, because you're working with the finance function, which is a critical capability for any organization, and it's a very complicated area for many businesses. So how do you, given the investment you've made in customer success, how do you balance the team's need to have domain expertise, given the nature of the financial world in which they work, alongside some of those customer success capabilities? How do you sort of balance those different attributes?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I kind of like to refer to it like a Venn diagram. If you could picture that, you think about the characteristics and attributes that make a successful customer success manager. And I usually lump it into 3 categories. I feel like they need to have a CS or a consulting type of a background in one of the circles, another circle domain expertise, and another circle sales expertise, actually. Because even though they're not selling, they do have a job to be able to look for those opportunities to surface to the sales team for expansion. So when I'm looking at customer success managers, how I hire is I like to make sure they have at least 2 of those 3 circles filled, at least. Optimally, all 3 would be fantastic. To me, the most important is that previous consulting customer success mindset. There's just a special skill set that you have to be able to listen and connect with the customer and just be able to interpret what they need and be able to solve for it. But that domain expertise, again, I think it's a little technology dependent, in certain types of technology where, I think it's commonplace. Like if you were a CSM for Zoom, it's probably, not as necessary to have deep domain expertise because everybody uses Zoom. You can relate to the customer and how they use Zoom. Finance is unique. It's really hard to fake finance. When you're a CSM and you're talking to a finance team and they're talking about their cash flow forecasting, you better know what that means and how it relates to the tool. So it's, I think for Planful specifically, having some relationship to finance and being able to speak the language of finance is super important. It doesn't necessarily have to mean you were an accountant in a past life, although extremely valuable if you are, but you have to be able to talk the talk and learn that language. So if I find a fantastic CSM that has the CS background and the sales background, but not finance, you have to make sure they can at least talk the nomenclature of finance and understand what budgeting and planning is all about, know what a monthly close cycle is, so they don't connect with a customer and the customer doesn't have a clue what they're talking about. It's all about making that connection. So for Planful, you have to be able to talk the talk at least, and understand it to some level of degree is my opinion.
Yeah, I like the simplicity of the Venn diagram of the attributes. I think one thing is just a comment. Sometimes people hear the word sales in the CSM community and they run a mile. We shift. Language is really important. We shifted the language here. We talk about commercial acumen.
Oh, I love that. I might adopt that.
Yeah. So it softens the blow for people where it's like, getting them or their head around, like we want to grow as a business so that you can grow in your role and, I don't know, earn more money, be more successful, get a promotion, hire more people. And for those things, we do actually need to sometimes ask our customers to buy more products from us. So,
but they're the best folks. They know they're the best lead generation engineer or generation team. If you think about an SDR, they're kind of like a glorified SDR to some degree because they're connected with the client and they know better than anyone where else they can use the tool. And if you don't empower that to come out of that team, they don't need to run the deal, but surface the opportunity at least. That's what we really need to see from our CSMs.
Yeah, well, on another call, we can talk about how you incentivize that, but that's a hornet's nest to go down. So So I think one of the I talk a lot about in our vision of the world at Precursive is that, well, our vision of the world, our vision of the modern world of SaaS is that you've got, companies spending a lot of time and effort on customer acquisition, and in parallel, it's nice to see now, obviously, customer success is kind of it's the new sales for many organizations. It's certainly risen to the top in terms of its strategic focus.
Yeah.
And so you have, sales is selling outcomes, right? Customer success and the services organization is enabling those outcomes to be realized through that initial post-sale implementation. And then, of course, customer success is taking the baton, as it were, and helping hopefully the customer to realize, outcomes that drive some form of a change for their business, right? Which is going to be business performance improvement, helping people in their daily lives at work, etc. And so in your environment, there's a lot of talk about outcomes, but it's how do these things manifest in the world of Planful and for your customers? What is it that people are trying to achieve there?
Yeah, no, thanks for asking. I think it's outcomes is such a key function for any CSM. You have to make sure the customer bought something. They need to be getting a return on the investment. They need to be getting the value that they anticipate to get when they purchase the product to begin with. Planful's not unique in terms of some of the common metrics of efficiency and getting time back. If you think about the Office of Finance, my goodness, these folks are stretched thin, and they are looking for that life raft to find some of that efficiency in their day-to-day. These guys are in spreadsheet, hell, if you will, looking for the errors in their data and so forth. And when you have a tool that they can trust, they can then focus on the more strategic nature of their work. So for finance, specifically for Planful, it is all about the efficiency play. I've been so fortunate to talk to a lot of our customers. They're getting to go to their kids' softball games again. They're able to approve a journal entry on their phone. I mean, my goodness, it's fantastic, the types of benefits. But I think the other thing too, there's a vision, at least in our space, which I don't think is totally unique, with broader adoption of a tool set too. So it's not just the finance team using our product. There's a vision to get the broader organization using the tool as well. So I think that's, not unique to Planful. A lot of software tools out there is to drive broad adoption, but it's a key metric. Adoption is something you have to pay attention to in customer success. And that comes to a lot of, little flavors, if you will, as to why somebody's not adopting a tool. It could be, we have to enhance your training program. Maybe we haven't taught people how to use it properly. Classic change management. And that comes all the way at the beginning in professional services and all the way through post-deployment. That's a big driver as well. And then the product itself, it's all about the user experience too. If the tool's hard to use, it's going to be hard to drive adoption. So there's a really big need to me to be tightly connected with the product organization and to make sure we're paying close attention to how to make the product simple and easy to use. So long story short, I mean, it's not just ROI, it's not just getting efficiency, it's the adoption is a key metric for any tool. If your end users aren't using it, you're not going to get that renewal, and they're not going to get the value out of the tool and why they purchased it. So I really focus on those things from a hardline metric, adoption and ROI and all that good stuff.
Yeah, and adoption is so driven by training and change management and L&D. Do you, out of curiosity, house that at the moment in your services team? Do they run the initial training as a part of the services engagement, and then CSMs follow up with additional training? I'm curious to how you do that.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So we have a training organization, which is straight up product training. And we have, we listed as a prerequisite, we need users of the tool, the future tool of Planful, to take that training first. And we do a crawl, walk, run kind of approach with deployment. And that's part of our change management strategy, actually, is, we'll build the first report, we'll build the second one together, and you'll build the third report. And so by the time our deployments are done, customers are pretty self-sufficient in the tool. And then post-deployment, our CSMs are there to catch them if they forgot how to do something, are there to support them when they look to do the next, thing in the product. But we actually have training and change management built in heavily into professional services through that joint deployment model. I think it's super risky if you don't. If you have, a team, a professional services team come in and do the whole thing and then leave, they don't know how to use and maintain it. that's a pretty high cost of ownership on the customer side. So that's one of our, differentiators is customers can use this tool without IT. They learn how to use it themselves. And it's a big differentiator for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really the most common trend that I see. One of the most common trends that I see across your peer group is this emphasis on how can we, like from a business strategy perspective and product strategy perspective, like how do we ensure that our products and solutions are easy to use, but functionally rich and expansive, right? And that's oftentimes very, very difficult to combine. We operate in an environment where our customers use the Salesforce platform, for example, which is a very expansive platform. You can do a lot to it, a lot in terms of configuration and these types of things. But that's a blessing and a curse because it means that you can actually, do kind of whatever you want, and you could over engineer things. And I just think that, so many businesses are under pressure to deliver more value more quickly. That the more, I think I almost see like CS is going to play such a critical role in that feedback loop into products. And services, in fact, needs to provide actually much more of a feedback loop into products because they're the ones at the coalface who are seeing this adoption issue or this piece of feedback. Is that something that resonates with you?
Oh my gosh, you have no idea. That was a huge, huge focus for me when I first got here. Super passionate about making sure our teams are connected with our product organization. We actually did some really cool things at Planful. When we first got there, I got very tight with our head of product and we developed a concept called a WAB. It stands for Workstream Advisory Board. And what it is the product team has functional tracks, performance, user enhancements, new functionality, whatever it is. And there's representatives from the PS side, the CS side, from sales and from training and technical support. And they all meet and they feed requirements in, and together they're representing the voice of the customer, driving against ease of implementation, driving for adoption. Where are the pain points in the product? So we're not just, you have to be innovative. You have to bring out new features, but you also have to make what you have work and be successful and easy to implement and adopt. So this WAB concept, it's so awesome because you see these real updates coming out in the product that customers are going, thank you, that is so much easier now to use. And it's a win-win. It's great for the customers. It's great for us. You drive more adoption. So to me, I think if your CS strategy doesn't include a tight connection with product, you are missing such a massive opportunity to make, a win-win scenario be in place. So yes, I'm very passionate about that. Can you tell?
Yeah, no, absolutely. One of our customers does something. I love that. I'm 100% going to be. I'll do a little summary at the end. But the WAB is the way forward, isn't it? Absolutely. I can totally see that. Interestingly, it resonates a lot because one of our customers, which is a spend management platform, actually a company called Precursive, they have a very sharp team there in their services organization. They do something really interesting. They track the reasons for delay in their implementations, and then they roll up the analysis of that. And so, for example, they look at things like, is this a product-related issue? Is it a deployment-related issue? Is it UAT? Is it customer stakeholders, for example, not being ready or not being, armed, as it were, with sort of the context? And then they run that analysis to see kind of what are the commonalities, and then that's getting fed back into the product organization as a direct mechanism of sort of re-engineering various elements of not just the product, but the way it's deployed, the way it's serviced and supported, to drive faster time to value. Because I think one of the things I was going to go on to ask you was, the pandemic, I would imagine, shone a very strong light on the world of planning, right? Because businesses were thinking, either looking at ways to shore up their finances or figuring out, frankly speaking, if they were hemorrhaging cash when they were going to run out of money. Yep. I would imagine that it's very much perceived as a source of competitive advantage for your customers. Did you see a big acceleration of companies and your customers really wanting to get to grips with things at that time and throughout?
Oh my gosh, yes. So this whole concept of, back office transformation for the finance team accelerated big time. I mean, the reality is There were so many different models to build depending on what was going to happen. So we call it scenario planning. Scenario A through Z had to be built. And if you're living in the old world of Excel, that's really hard to do. And the other thing, so definitely from a scenario planning perspective, 100% tooling and automation was critical. And if you think about it, and I think about our CFO at Planful, the number of different types of versions of data and reports that was needed from the board, from the CEO, my goodness, all of our customers were feeling that. And, if you're in Excel and you've got 10 different files sitting all over the place to consolidate data fast and quickly because things were moving so fast, it was impossible for a lot of our CFOs. So we have seen this year, especially, a huge growth come to our company and lots of demand for the product because of that need for acceleration, being able to respond quickly and being able to model so many different outcomes. And to your point, cash is king for these companies, especially smaller companies, and knowing, where you're going to sit from a cash management perspective in times like this, it's crazy. Finance teams were stretched, to me, thin before the pandemic. My goodness, I have a whole new respect for finance organizations and the late nights that they work.
I bet.
Right? But you can imagine, these poor folks, drilling and looking for errors in data and all of that they don't have time for that. They need to be, quick with numbers and working with their business partners and being able to put together strategic plans and get everybody aligned on what was best for the company. You got to have tooling to do that. And so, I think a lot of folks have really realized that. And, a lot of our customers have been just so grateful to have Planful to get through and weather the storm through the pandemic. It's been really interesting.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. We were chatting beforehand, and I've got a friend of mine in the Denver area who runs a large consulting business, and they use our tool. And I was, when we were chatting, because he was back there, he couldn't get back into London, so we couldn't go for beers. And and I was saying, like, how are you using Precursive? Is it helpful right now? Because I was thinking, well, new sales and consulting was slowing down. He's like, it's absolutely critical. It's like, number one, I could see within a day who I was going to need to furlough or not. And I was like, wow, okay, that's great. And you kind of, I think that's where technology is sometimes underappreciated. Like, we all work in tech, but it's that genuine, like, decision making when you're up against it.
Yes.
That you can't put a price. It's so valuable, right?
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think the other thing too, if you think about, the job market too, now that we're starting to come out of this, they talk about this great resignation. Folks are looking for new jobs. They just went through pain. And if there's no, kind of light on the other side of the tunnel with it's going to get better through tooling and automation, they're living in archaic worlds, you're going to lose good talent to companies that are investing in digital technologies. So I think I don't know, it's a combination of things that has really put a big jolt in the economy, which is great for us to purchase tools like this for the real-time insights, for the keeping the talent on board, all of that good stuff. So.
And so you talk about real-time insights, which leads us, it's almost as if we planned this, Kimberly, but data and insight is something that, as a customer success leader, I'm sure that, given the breadth of your organization, is something you have to be on top of. What are some of the metrics that matter to you in your world now?
Yeah, it's funny. I've got an amazing operations leader, and she helps me. And we've just put in place these monthly operational reviews. So we look at data across all of the different teams in my organization on a regular basis, CSAT, our utilization for professional services, things of that nature. But, for customer success specifically, net retention is a metric our entire company maps to, and I know it's a little bit cliche to say retention being a team sport, but it is, net retention is huge. Everybody contributes to that from a product perspective, a sales perspective, a CS perspective, but net retention is something we pay careful attention to, but it's comprised, this, but it's comprised of so much. You've got your available to renew. We call it at bat or ATR retention. And that's, what's up for renewal in a current given calendar year. And then you've got your backlog that feeds your gross retention. And then you've got your upsell that feeds net retention. And if you think about it, the entire organization, the customer facing organization, has a pretty big piece in all of that. So that at bat retention, it's an indicator of how we're engaging with our customers and driving that successful deployment, obviously, making sure they're getting the value and outcomes they expected. But it's really interesting. Gross retention is all about the at-bat retention, but also the backlog of the multi-year deals. So you've got to have a renewals team and your sales team motivated to drive multi-years, because when that backlog renews at 100%, your gross retention shoots up right where you want it to be. And then you flip over to the net retention, and it's the upsell piece. So it's that tight connection with sales and making sure everyone's motivated to expand your existing base. So I would say not just my team, but as a company, net retention is something we're all very, very, very focused on. It's a big metric of the health of the business.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, multi-year renewals, if they're paid up front and if they're genuine multi-year renewals without any opt-out clauses.
That's exactly right. It's so nice when you find people that get it, because it's like a therapy session. It's fantastic.
I was coached very early on that from one of my contacts. That's interesting, and I mean, I think the net retention thing. I was talking to Dave Jackson, who was on this show, who's the founder of the customer company, and he, we were talking. He came in and he did some training from my team internally on SaaS metrics, unit economics, ARR, net retention, gross retention. I remember me asking in the session, it's like, NRR is very important, but do people really get it?
Yeah,
and exactly. Like, well, what do you mean? It's like, well, conceptually as a metric, we get it, but do people and companies get what it takes to get there? And I think your point around it being a team sport is exactly that. It's like marketing, customer success starts not in onboarding, or stop that phrase now. It starts in marketing, because you've got to be attracting the right types of customers, acquiring the right types of customers, making them successful, growing them, renewing them, all of these types of things in order to get to that world. And if anything in that, in that chain falls over, it all kind of falls over like a pack of cards, doesn't it?
Exactly. I could not agree with you more. It's really great, because I think that our company really gets that. But 100% agreed.
We're going to start doing these as videos on our website at some point, because I love it when people actually nod, but no one gets to see that when I'm blathering on these. So, okay, finally, well, look, I really enjoyed the conversation, and I think the last thing that we were going to explore was we've talked about, the metrics, the kind of this way to have the finger on the pulse of the business, right? And we can understand more about our team, our customers, and I think really it kind of informs. There's obviously a lot of metrics that are aligned to customer experience, right? NPS, these types of things is something that you're very, very passionate about. I'm curious to know, where does that passion come from? What's the origins of that for you?
Yeah, it is definitely something that's super near and dear to my heart. So I was really fortunate. I grew up with two teachers in my family, both my mom and dad. My dad was a high school teacher and my mom was an elementary school teacher. And they were both just amazing at their craft. It's funny. I think about my sisters, my cousins, everybody, they're all teachers in my family. Somehow I took a different path. But, watching them as a kid growing up was really interesting, especially my dad. He was a science teacher. He was that favorite teacher in high school. He connected with students like you've never seen. He was the guy that people joked around. He had an IV of coffee, like he would carry around with him all day long, and he would be the funny guy at Halloween. He'd shave half of his beard and say, which way should I go? And it was just, it's funny. Students really connected with him, but he really connected with them too. And he had this amazing way to figure out, how do I need to connect with this kid so they understand what I'm trying to convey to them? How do I help this kid be successful? And it was really neat, because later, in life, these students, we would run into them everywhere. In Europe, we ran into them on the Staten Island Ferry in New York, and students would come up to my dad out of nowhere and say, I had you, Mr. Freed, you were my favorite teacher. And that always stuck with me. And it was so neat to see the impact that he had made on so many students. And what it was is, and my mom was the same, they were just little elementary students. So, the memory span isn't quite as long. But, what stuck with me was the ability for him to connect and have such an impact. And I carried that through with me. And I always had this aspiration to drive that connection with a person and really understand. And, both in how I lead teams and with customers. And I really have a philosophy with my organization is find that connection with your customer, really understand what they need to be successful. Whether you get to know them on a personal level or not, really understand what it takes to help them be successful. And, I think about my dad as that favorite teacher. Why can't we be that favorite vendor too? Right. So, customers leave, they go to other companies. So you want, when they go to the other companies, to say, it'd be great if I could work with that company again. They were tremendous. They understood me. They knew what it took to be successful, but not just from a product perspective, but from a business perspective. So, I think for me, I am really passionate about it because I see the impact of just connecting with people. We're people, right? Everyone puts their pants on one leg at a time, the same way as each other, and just finding that connection to me is so powerful. And I really enjoyed that. So my teams know I'm kind of obsessed with it. So I enjoy trying to make experience be a big focus for us.
What's your dad's name?
His name is Don Friedrichsen. His first name is Herman, which is really funny. He didn't realize he should go by Don until later in life, but yeah.
So what's his full name? That's a great name.
Herman Donald Friedrichsen. I don't know if his mom didn't like him or something, but he went by Don as he felt.
That's a proper teacher's name, though. We're going to call him. So he was Mr. Sims, right? So
he was Mr. Freed. He went by Mr. Freed because Sims is my married name.
Oh, okay.
But he went by Mr. Freed.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. No, it's all good. Very German. Very German.
Yeah. So he has, though, like, I think it's a lovely, it's very genuine, and I think it's very true, in the sense that it's that genuine empathy, right? That favorite teacher. I'm just smiling because I'm like I told you, I'm in Bristol, which is where I'm from. I'm at my mum's house. I'm seeing lots of people from when I was a child, and I was with someone on Sunday, my mum's friend, talking about my favorite teacher, who was a guy called Dr. Ransom. Who was my Russian teacher. I did Russian at school, and he was exactly that. He had, I loved going to his class. Russian was a phenomenally difficult subject, but everyone loved him, and he was 6'11", this guy, and everyone loved him. And I think what he and your father had, with the greatest respect, is genuine empathy.
Yep.
And genuine empathy, like as a teacher, like I think what's in the business world, you can't fake that. Like people see through it, right? They're like, oh yeah, this person says something and they do something different. And just looking at the feedback on you from your colleagues online and former staff, that very much shines through. So it's fantastic to hear where that comes from. Yeah. I'm curious, like, do you like work at nurturing that in yourself or in your staff? I'm curious to know.
It's funny, to your point, it's you can't force somebody to be empathetic, but what you can do is help them to think about things from different lenses. So I've tried all sorts of different ways to connect with people too. It's the same thing, right? As a teacher would do. How do you connect with your folks to establish that kind of empathy for customers, to see the perspective that the customers are coming from? There's this cool Netflix documentary out there. It's by Doc Rivers. It's called The 5 Rules for Life, and he's got these 5 philosophies. Ubuntu, forward progress, pressure is a privilege. They're just these amazing philosophies. And what was really cool, I was able to get my team together, and I used tools like that to figure out what kind of ignites somebody to be thinking about things a little bit of a different way, and had them all watch the video, and it really resonated with them. And, so I bring in different kind of ideas and thought processes. My last company, we used
mediums as well. and
Yeah,
mediums as
you
well,
have
right? Isn't it?
to.
So,
You have to
yeah,
figure out the
yeah,
right way to
yeah,
connect. We had a
yeah.
concept called a Sherpa at my last company. I said, CSMs, you guys are the Sherpas. You guys have to guide your customers on a journey. They don't know where they're going, but you do. So take them on that journey. So, I've kind of tried different ways to connect with them to help them embrace their role, to figure out how to connect with customers and help drive them on that path to success. But you just got to try different things and figure out what works for your teams. So no magic silver
Wonderful.
bullet, but lots of different things.
Wonderful. I genuinely, I honestly, I just, to everyone listening and to yourself, I genuinely love these conversations because I think it's very, the customer success community and certainly the areas of B2B SaaS that we operate in is full of some really, really genuinely lovely people. So
Yeah.
I thank you very much indeed for your time for coming on. I want to try and summarize a few of the things that people have benefited from in this show. So if you haven't been paying attention, I've been taking notes. And so if you're thinking about your organizational structure and your customer success strategy, right, it depends on a post-it note and post it on or near your laptop. Think about those building blocks that are appropriate for your own organization and take into account that specialization will create scale. So if you are debating about whether you should be potentially splitting your sales and your account management and your customer success, take the plunge and do it. You will see the benefits. If you think about the attributes of a CSM, then think about your own Venn diagram. And for Kimberly, she drops consulting, domain experience, and commercial acumen, you might be calling it now, into it. And if you're not webbing, you're getting it wrong because you need to have that workstream advisory board or in some shape or form with PS, support, CS, sales, all coming back with feedback into the product organization so that ultimately you can drive more value for your customers more quickly. And one that I really liked, which is net retention is a team sport. Couldn't agree with you more. So thank you ever so much for joining. Have you enjoyed it?
Oh my gosh, so much. Thank you so much for having me, Jonathan. This was fantastic.
Brilliant, brilliant. Good to hear. So thanks everyone for joining. Head over to precursive.com for more amazing content. I'm going to send you something, Kimberly, which is our How to Scale in SaaS with Customer Onboarding white paper, which we were delighted to partner on with AppsFlyer, Box, GoCartless, and PatSnap, because it's got a load of great frameworks and insights there for the modern world of the customer success manager and the importance of that first step in the customer journey. And subscribe to our podcasts on whichever given medium you're using, be it Spotify, Apple, or Google. So thanks everyone for joining and enjoy the rest of your Thursday, even though you may be listening to this on a Monday or a Saturday. Thanks everybody. Thanks, Kimberly.
Thanks, Jonathan.